Well now, so I guess we'd like to first of all get out the circumstances under which you moved to your small town. So could we each take an opportunity to talk about where you moved to, where you're living now, where you moved from, and just some of the circumstances that went into that moment in your life when you decided to make the relocation choice. Why don't we just go across this way?
I was wondering what end you'd start on. I'm Courtney Burgee, and I'm from Lanesboro, Minnesota. I grew up in rural Lanesboro on a farm just south of town, and I went to college at Luther College in Decorah, which is about 45 minutes south of Lanesboro. And my sophomore year of, college, I needed a job for the summer, and I wanted to live at home so I could have my garden and hang out with my little brothers and sisters. So I saw that the local art center was hiring an intern, and I went and applied. And I was not even an art major at that time. I was a communications major, and I was running to get into writing. And so I got this internship at the local art center in town, which I really had never participated in before. And after that summer, I was totally hooked. I went back to college and changed my major to art and learned how to do grant writing and community development. And so after my junior year of college, I got a call from the director of the Lanesboro Arts Center, John Davis, who was here last year as the keynote at the Rural Arts and Culture Summit, if any of you were here. It was a wonderful event. But he called me and he said, "Courtney, I have a job for you if you want to come back after college," and that never happens, right? So I said, "Oh, okay, well, I'm an art major, and that would be pretty stupid not to take a job." So I did. I said, "Okay, you got me." So my entire senior year then, I worked part-time for the Art Center for the specific capital campaign that we're working on right now called the Lanesboro Arts Campus. It's a creative placemaking initiative. And so I've been kind of in charge of fundraising and grant writing for that since I graduated in 2012. I started full-time the day after graduation. So I've been working there for 2 years now. And I never expected to be back in my community, and like kind of the themes we're talking about this morning, the sense of going home is failing has been kind of blaring in my face for the last 2 years, but now being able to present myself in a different perspective and having a community event where I'm shaking hands with the local banker for his donation when I dated his son in high school is a little uncanny, a little funny, but I really appreciate all the investment that my community has made in me, and I'm learning so much just by being in a place where I can not only speak for the arts and the progressive nature of the creative placemaking and community development, but also as one of the good old boys' daughters. So that's my story.
My name is Tracy Dennis. I currently live in O'Neill, Nebraska, which is north central. I am originally from Hayter, Nebraska. Not very many people probably know where Hayter is. It's one of our very rural communities of about 260 people. It's just a few miles north of Norfolk. Grew up there, and then when I graduated, I took off for the city, and I didn't want to come back. So I moved to Lincoln for a couple years, and then I moved to Omaha, and I fell in love with my job. I worked for the UNO College of Business for 6+ years. And then during that time, I met a handsome man from Holt County. And if you have handsome men in your small communities, market them. Because that's what brought me back. So, my husband is a grain merchandiser, and we have a elevator. So wasn't gonna exist in Omaha. So, about a year and a half ago, I moved back to O'Neill. And I took a job, that was the hardest part for me, is finding a job, especially because I have a master's degree in business, so there wasn't very many options. But I took a job, wasn't quite loving it as much as I hoped, and so then, our keynotes keep talking about this poster child for Holt County, who is now my boss. So she stole me away from my job, and now I work for the Holt County Economic Development Office, and I love it. So I've just been in Holt County for a year and a half, and I'm one of those people who is new and younger and they saw that I wanted to get involved, and now I'm up to my eyeballs in involvement. So, ask and ye shall receive.
So market your handsome young men. Huh? You know, in Minnesota, Garrison Keeler tells us that all the men are good looking in Minnesota. I don't know about Nebraska.
Hello, I'm Christina Lean, and I currently live in Flum, Minnesota. It's F-L-O-M, but it's pronounced Flum. And we are by Detroit Lakes area, up a little bit north, maybe closer to Monoman. But I'm originally from West Fargo, grew up in West Fargo, and went to school there, in college at NDSU, and was living in town, not enjoying necessarily living in the city. I always wanted to live in the country, but maybe not quite as rural or as small as I ended up. But I met my handsome husband, who's right over there, in Fargo, and he farmed part-time, and he was working in Fargo, but always wanted to move back to his hometown. So he proposed the idea of moving to Flum, and at the time I worked for a bank and I did financial planning, and always wanted to start my own business. So I was kind of free to move if I wanted to. And so, actually I should back up a little bit. I was to this town one time, many years before I met my husband. I used to take wedding pictures, and I pulled into this town with the photographer that I was with, and I remember stopping at this little cafe, and we stopped in for lunch, and there was this lady and her 3 daughters, and they patiently waited while we finished eating because the entire town was going to close down to go to this wedding. And I remember thinking, this is really strange. You know, I'm from Fargo. They don't close restaurants to go to the wedding. So went to the wedding, took the wedding pictures, and yeah, we got there, and the lady and her 3 daughters ended up sitting right next to us. And we pulled out of town, and I remember thinking, that's probably someplace I'll never be to again. That was a little small, it was out of the way, it wasn't even on the main road. But fast forward, I end up meeting my husband, and he's from this small town. So I go with him out to his folks' place one weekend. Now we're just dating, I'm not thinking that we're gonna end up in this town. And they rented out a house, and it was vacant at the time, and his parents said, let's go and check out the house, and we walked in the back door, and it was just this rundown house, and I remember walking in the back door saying, my goodness, I would never live in this house. Well, that's exactly where I live today. So the first lesson is I never say never. But that's actually 14 years ago, so I was a newcomer to a small community. I didn't move there yesterday, but once we moved there, I realized the town was kind of on its way to closing. They were talking about, you know, whether or not the cafe was going to be able to stay open, would the gas station stay open. So my husband and I would sit up at night thinking, actually, I remember telling him, I can't believe you drugged me here and they're going to close this town down. But we dreamt up ways, trying to figure out what kind of resources we have in our community that we could keep this place going. And little by little, we started some organizations. We invited outside help. Extension came and helped us. Minnesota Tourism came and helped us. Northwest Regional Development Commission came. And I was kind of the crazy lady from outside that thought, you know, we can save this town, and everybody in town thought, you know, we tried all that 30 years ago, it'll never work. But by bringing in all the outside resources and people that also thought we could make it, they helped us out, and we've been going strong ever since. And we don't have a lot of, our resources are our people. We don't have a pretty lake or anything to come visit. We don't have a lot of businesses to come visit. So we're all about events. And so that's kind of, I'm the president of our community club and revitalization project, and that's what we do. We're all about bringing people, and our slogan is Friends Gather Here.
Mm-hmm.
Hi everyone, my name is Josue Palacios. I'm from Guatemala, and I came to the US like 15 years ago, and I used to live in the cities. And I got married like 6 years ago, and like a year ago, we were really having problems making enough money to live in the cities. And we were really broke. So I talked to my wife, and I told her that we need to succeed, but we need to make enough money to survive, you know. So I talked to a friend, and he lives in Marshall, and he told me that the Marshall have too many opportunities for new people and for people who decided to move there. So he told me that he was selling a house, and I told him that I was really broke. Can't afford my rent. And he told me that he was willing to rent me the house, and if I decided to buy it, I can buy the house. So I was really broke, you know, and I told him if I have enough money to get there, I will move. And I talked to my wife, and we come with $100. And I remember that we put everything in the truck, clothes and diapers for my kids. And I put $50 in the gas, and I started driving. And we prayed, like, because I was hoping that this little town will be the answers for our prayers. And I get there, and I talked to my friend, and he showed me the house, and we moved in the house, and the house was very empty. There was nothing there, just our clothes. And one of the neighbors, she gave us some furniture, like chairs, tables, and I see that people is more friendly. They are willing to help you. In the city, in the big city, it's really hard to trust your neighbor. And that's why I love living in a small town. And I see that there is more opportunity for people like me that wanna succeed. But one of the keys is education. And here I have more time to study, and I can make enough money with one job to provide to my family the necessary to be, and to be like to have what I didn't have in the cities. We used to live in an apartment with another two families, and it was really, really bad. The neighborhood was really bad too, and I don't want my kids to suffer what I suffer in the city. It's not that there's no jobs there, but the employees, they don't pay enough sometimes. And I used to work 2 jobs to just make enough to pay my mortgage, the rent, sorry. And here I'll be working with the EV in Marshall. I've been living in Marshall for almost 1 year, and I get my GED, and I'm working to get like my TMA, but I also have already the CNA is a certificate nurse assistant, and I see that through this I can provide more for my family, more stability, and I told my family that they should move to a small community. Everybody is willing to help you, and everybody knows you, and it's very nice. It's more secure, and also the employees, they're very nice too. And everybody, if they saw you in the street, they say hi to you. Like I was telling before my friend, and I remember when I was back in the cities, I say hi to someone, and he come to me and he said, why you're saying hi to me? He was really really mad, and I told him I just trying to be nice, and it's it's a very different living in a small town, and I'm happy to live in a small community. Thank you.
My name is Nicole Sedlacek. I live right now in O'Neill, Nebraska, which is Holt County, north central part of the state. I grew up, graduated from high school in a small community of about 500, graduated from Spencer Napier High School. While I was in high school, I always knew that I wanted to return to the small town. I was going to buy the small town newspaper, and I was going to be editor of that small town newspaper. The community, as I was growing up, I lost my mom when I was a teenager. My dad was never home, and so I was kind of this little. I had a sister who was just a year younger than me, but we were kind of these. I'll call ourselves kind of orphan children. That we were kind of really left alone a lot with my dad driving truck. And so I felt like the community had really raised me, and so I really felt this sense of belonging to a small community. And so I always knew that I was going to come back to a small town. So I went to college, to Northeast Community College, which is about 2 hours from where I went to high school. Studied journalism. Again, was going to come back and take over that small town newspaper that wasn't for sale yet. But I had it in my head. I was going to run this newspaper. But I received a phone call while I was in between one of my classes. A friend who had said, "Hey, Nicole, there is a job opportunity in O'Neill, which is just 30 miles of where I went to high school at. There's a job opportunity. They're looking for someone to co-host a morning show, and I thought of you, and I think you'd really like it, and I think you'd enjoy it." And I'm thinking, well, I'm studying journalism. I'm studying newspaper. I'm gonna buy that newspaper, but I decided to kind of really just to go for it. And so that's really what took me back to the community. That same friend is the friend who introduced me to my who would be my husband, and so a great dear friend who really really knew what I was all about. But I really just had this sense of belonging that I wanted to be in a small community, knowing how that community kind of helped me get through some really hard times and really kind of helped raise me. I had a lot of I always say I have a lot of moms. I had a lot of people looking out for me as I was going through high school and as I went off to college. And so I felt like I had this sense of belonging to return to a small community. O'Neill is a small community. I still feel, I'm only 30 miles from Spencer, so I really still feel like I'm home. And I work in economic development, where I'm working with newcomers, alumni who are wanting to return to our community. We work with newcomers really on a daily basis, and we keep track of all of these newcomers in kind of a stalking kind of way. That we have this list of people who have moved in. So if you want ideas on how to do that, I can talk to you later. But that's just kind of my story. Again, I really knew that. Again, I wanted to again, I haven't bought that small town newspaper. It still isn't for sale. But I did have, through the course of high school and even my college advisor, for a graduation gift, the gift that I remember the most from graduating, she gave me a stack of play money. And this was money for me to, when the time was right, I had this play money to go buy that newspaper or that business that I wanted to buy when I would go back to my hometown. And so out of all of the gifts that I've received for graduation, that's the one that really stood out to me. It was a message that, here's this symbolism, go out and achieve that and go do it. And she had faith in me.
Arnie, I think Nicole and I both agree that we're kind of overdressed for this event. So, but anywho, I'm Sean Yang, and I was born in Laos, a little country in Southeast Asia, and I was born after the war, so it's fortunate that, but it's unfortunate that I was born during the evacuation period. And so I was brought to the States very little. I was born and then was raised in a little rural town of California, population of 35,000, and so that's probably where I got my accent from. And my family, my father decides that, actually he's in the impression that Minnesota has a better education system, And so, and after education, Minnesota would give me a better job or a job opportunity. So that's why we moved to Minnesota. And the third reason is majority of my immediate family are in Minnesota. And so after college, Schwann's gave me a call and said, do you want a job in Marshall, Minnesota? And I'm like, Marshall, Minnesota, where is Marshall, Minnesota? Is that a different state? And so I decided, why not? Little house in the prairie, what could go wrong? And so here I am, 10 years after, and I decided to jump into, I wouldn't say politics, but it's a very, very teeny civic engagement. And so, and with the support of the families and my wife, and with the community that I'm in, and the Laos is made up with a lot of nationalities. So it's I'm part of the Hmong nationality, and Walnut Grove has a big influx of Hmong population, and we're about, I would say, 35 to 40% Hmong in Walnut Grove, Minnesota, plus or minus, I would say, plus 5%. And so it's great that somebody has, I mean, it's been approached before that somebody should be more engaged with the local, and so I decided to be the guinea pig of it. And so 10 years after, here I am. And one thing I wanted to tell you about my wife is that she's a city girl, and when I have her, when we got married, and I got the job offer, and I told her that we're moving down to Marshall, Minnesota, and she's like, I'm divorcing you. And so it took some time to convince her. It took actually 6 months to convince her to come down. And she had the hardest time adjusting to rural Minnesota, population of 599, and she didn't quite fit in at all. And so after a year or so, and after we have our first kids, second kids, and now I ask her, let's move back to the metro area. And she's like, I'll divorce you. So, thank you.
What a great set of stories. And, you know, one thing I'm struck by after this morning's earlier sessions is I didn't hear a single story of failure and crashing out of big city life and going back to the rural areas with your tail between your legs. That's not what I'm hearing here at all. I'm hearing tales of opportunity and real possibility, and it sounds like in many cases working out really well. Let me get down to the question of, so put yourself back in the mindset right before you moved, and you're thinking about going from urban to rural. What are you worried about? What are you thinking you might not be able to cope with? And then what are some things that you should have been worried about you discovered later? So we don't need to take this systematically like we did the last one, but if anybody feels like they want to grab the microphone and talk to those two questions.
Well, the town that I live in is less than 40 people, and so I was a little concerned, and so was all of my family and friends. What was I going to do? What were you going to do every day? You know, you're not going to have any stores, or there's no people around you. And probably the first thing I learned in a small community, I would argue there's almost more things to do in a small community than there are in a large community. When I worked in Fargo, I worked at the bank, and I went to work and I went home, you know, or you went to the grocery store. My parents lived down the road, but I didn't see them every day. In Flum, my in-laws drive in the driveway every day and come and see me, or, you know, people invite you over. We go and visit each other. We have events that we go to all the time. So for me, that was my biggest concern. And social, I just thought there wasn't going to be as much going on. But for us, where I live anyways, I would say it's more social and there's more going on in a small community than a large one.
Yeah, I was worried to run out of gas. No, I was worried to find what happened if we didn't find a job or the family. We don't have family in small town. It was kind of a big decision, but we did it, and with all the worries and everything, we made it. So it was at that moment was kind of hard to take the decision to leave the little that we was having in the city to move to you know, to nothing or everything. So we just moved without being worried too much. Yeah.
I think there's concerns and there's I would say happiness with it, being that as me and my wife, we drove down, we were looking at rural Minnesota, and as we drove down from the cities, it's the housing changes, the environment changes, and then all of a sudden it's fields of corns and fields of soybeans, and she's like, really? And so I think the biggest concern is the job stability. She was concerned that in majority of the families that actually moved to Warner Grove is that they're concerned about housings. Are the houses, if the jobs, if they're being paid $8 an hour, $10 an hour, can they afford housings that are like the metro areas? So if you're looking at $60,000 homes, and if you're making $8 to $10 an hour, will you survive, or will there be layoff? If there is layoff, will you find another job in replacement? And so my wife and I were fortunate to be a little educated, and we got a little better paying jobs and more of a office environment. But the majority of the younger kids and the younger generations and the older folks, and Pat, see her sitting there, is the older folks who are our parents don't have the language to communicate to get a better job. And so their concern is the communication and getting the job, and the younger folks is getting the education to get a better paying job in Southwest Minnesota. And so that's the concern that we have. Yes, we have the quality of life, but can we sustain that quality of life in rural Minnesota?
One concern that really kind of jumped to my head, I was thinking about, taking that job with the radio station. I wanted to be, in high school I was very involved in the community. When I went off to college, I wasn't as involved volunteering, but I knew I wanted to be more involved in a volunteer of something. And so my concern was, would I as a young adult, or would I, kind of as this alumni coming back to the area, be able to be involved with community organizations. And to be honest, at first it was. I think things have changed quite a bit since I have come back, but it did take a while to be asked to participate we had a Big Pal, Little Pal program, and it also took a while for, they knew I was very passionate, about reading in the library, but it took 2 years to be asked to be on the Friends of the Library board. And so it took some time to kind of get involved with the community. I kind of jumped in right away, maybe too strong, and possibly turned some of the current leadership off to maybe my sense of let's change the world kind of attitude. But they've stuck with me, and I've stuck with them, and now I'm probably involved way more than I probably should be sometimes. That I'm not looking to become involved anymore, I guess. I want to stay involved and engaged, but I'm not looking for more volunteer opportunities. I shouldn't say I'm involved.
Let's be honest, the thing I was worried about leaving was Hy-Vee. Do they even have Hy-Vee in Minnesota? Do you have Hy-Vee? Okay, yep, obsessed. To go to a small town grocery store that only has, well, it actually has 10 aisles, I think, but That was the scariest part for me, was to leave the grocery store. I had to take a pay cut to move. I was worried about that, but my commute is less than a mile now. Instead of 12 miles that took me 45 plus minutes, it takes me a minute to get to work. I never even look at my gas gauge. My paycheck goes further because I'm an hour and 15 minutes away from Target. It's true. And then actually, I've been married a year on Sunday, but housing. Our area is in a severe housing shortage, which some people can't say, but it's tough. When I moved into it, we did find a very nice rental house. We were blessed. But I moved in, and my husband had a Cabela's chair and a very large TV. And we just bought our first home, but we can't move in until the end of summer. And I feel like, it's large, and I'm going to feel like we're going back to that Cabela's chair and large TV. But it took us a long time to find a house, so patience paid off.
I think the thing that I was worried about coming back to my community was just the lack of opportunity, opportunity to be stimulated maybe in like an academic or cultural way. I actually, in preparation for this panel, I had a group of my 20-something friends over and kind of talked about what they were, intimidated by, because a lot of them were brought to Lanesboro the same way I was, through an internship or a stint at a local nonprofit organization. And I asked them, so what's the deal? Why do people move to urban areas right after college, and why don't they come to these rural places where they're given opportunities to be leaders in their organizations, or maybe buy a home where they couldn't afford it elsewhere? And my friend Gary's like, Courtney, romance. People, young people often are thinking, okay, right after college we have to go to the city and find a spouse. And I think I wasn't necessarily as worried about that, but that is a huge thing for a lot of 20-somethings and people, in our generation, just because it is such a huge part of your life. And if you are going back to your community where you might not have a significant other, it does affect that. But and as far as opportunity goes, like you said, with having so much social events going on and everything, I found that people get a little bit more creative about making the events for themselves. I was really interested in teaching art, and so I started an after-school art program where I got to hang out with all these awesome kids and engage volunteer high schoolers in that program. And a group of my younger friends, we started a knitting circle. And that has now morphed into a kind of a collaboration with Sylvan Manor, which is a bunch of elderly women who live there, and we kind of commingle now. So I think those kind of things are, the lack of opportunity is what I was worried about, but it turned into be more opportunity than I even thought, so.
What a great bunch of answers. And it raises so many other things. Courtney, I just read a study by a guy named Robert Shepard in something called the Great Plains Research Journal. And one of the things he's pointing out is that this emptying out of the youth cohort is gendered, that women are leaving small towns in particular at a faster rate than men are. And so if you compare the teenage cohort to the 20-something cohort, you see it's increasingly male in the 20 cohort. The young women are off to the cities, and they like it. That goes to the last point you were making.
Yeah, I believe that. I guess in my community, I grew up on a farm, and my brother's farm, and a lot of my male friends farm, and so that probably is part of it. And in my mind is that there's more opportunities for jobs for males, maybe in construction businesses, agricultural businesses. So yeah, I would believe that. And also I think females too we're all kind of overachievers, and we like to be ambitious and go get it. And so I think a lot of my friends they left for the city to find more opportunity than they had maybe in a rural town.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Anybody have questions for our...
I'm kind of interested in Jose and Sean. What about prejudice and bias? You know, I think that's something we don't really talk about. And we're basically primarily in a, white part of the United States, I think. And I had a son-in-law that had kind of faced some prejudice downtown in Brookings, South Dakota. And it really alarmed me. So I guess it kind of scared him to the point that he maybe needs to go to a big city where there's more, cultural, and that he could maybe fit in better. And he's just looking to go to college there in Brookings. And granted, it's a small, could have been a small faction of guys that were downtown and just decided to pick on him, and he's South Korean. And so that really concerns me, and I also know of some other situations in Huron, South Dakota. And so I think it needs to be addressed more, and that is a concern. So I guess I'd like to know your opinions of that, and that we all know that all small towns aren't going to be the same, so they're going to maybe respond to you differently. But do you have views on that or anything you'd like to share?
Thank you. It's a great question. I may or may not answer it correctly, but there is prejudice in every aspect of every person there is, whether it's from the white population, the mainstream population, and the Hmong population itself. When the first wave of Hmong population that moved into Walnut Grove did not fit in well. They were, now we gotta remember the population itself is aging populations, and you have a lot of older folks, older generation, white folks that does not or have not heard of the Hmong population at all. And when the biggest draw is that the Hmong kids love being outdoors, and when you have 60, 70-year-old white folks in their homes, they don't like kids being outdoors. And my neighbor is more of a compliment, saying that, actually you guys actually brought the town back to life, because your kids came in, they're out there, they're playing, they're enjoying life. Whereas 10 years ago, when I walked the street, I'm pretty sure I was going to be taken out by a sniper. Because they did not want people to be out there. They didn't like the activities. They just want to be retired. They are retired. So they didn't want to be active in the community much more. And so when we came in, all of that changed. We brought in the kids to the schools. The teachers have a hard time with the children's too, because they tend to be more active than, I would say, the white kids, where they're a little bit more obedient. And so there is prejudice from the white folks, and also from the Hmong folks. There's also prejudice from that side too, where they didn't like the way that it's sold, or the way that they're talked to. And so it's, even when they're greeting the Hmong populations, they didn't, it's the language barrier that kind of breaks that bridge. They're just saying hi, and they're under the impression that leave. So that's the problem that we have. And there are prejudice. That's why when I came down, the Hmong population and also the white population encourages someone that has the language to be in between and be that bridge, so that there's no miscommunications there. So it's come long ways.
Yes, I was worried for that when I moved to the small town, because it's less diversity. And at the beginning, I feel uncomfortable because I was the only Hispanic and people call me Mexican, or they tell me stuff to me, and I was feeling kind of bad, but now I feel I'm getting used to be the only Hispanic where I work. So sometimes I'm the only one of color, and I'm not of color, of course, but I'm the only one different. And but some people are really nice to make me feel comfortable, and they're not like racist. But some people just they they are not used to the diversity, and maybe that's why they act like that. Maybe it's just because they're used to live just around the same culture, the same people. And I think this is changing also the culture of the small towns, because it's more people who is moving from the big cities to small communities. There is also white, color people, and I believe that everything is gonna change in the future. Where my son is gonna go to school, I think he's the only one, and I feel sorry for him, but I know he's gonna be good and he's gonna be doing well in school. So I don't think we have to worry if they don't do like bad things to us. If they just say things, we can handle that.
I have a question for Christina and Nicole. Being someone who jumps in very enthusiastically, like you said, and then also with your experience, I'm wondering how you overcome people who are negative about change or are saying, oh, that won't work, or how do you get past that? What did you do? And how did you get people behind you?
Well, I definitely encountered that. Not that people are negative, they wanted their community to work. They just couldn't quite see how anything was possible. Like I said, I heard that comment many times, that 30 years ago we tried that won't work, forget it, you know. So when I made reference to having some outside organizations come and help, it was kind of having this whole army of people that said, this is really possible, and it's not just me, this one person thinking, you know, I'm kind of that eternal optimist, you know, anything's possible even when it's probably not, you know, but so what we did was we called a town meeting, and so we invited everybody, phone calls, you know, and sent messages, whatever, and we met at our town hall, and it was a fantastic turnout, and it was so fun to actually listen. We had different people talking with ideas about, you know, small towns don't have to die. People can migrate from the larger towns to small towns. But the best part of the day was we put these sheets of paper up on the wall, and we went around the room, and they were allowed to throw out suggestions of anything that they thought they would like to see, even if they were completely off the wall. And the key was there was no negativity. You couldn't say anything negative. So when you normally could, and you weren't allowed to, and everybody just had the opportunity, there was two things. Nothing was bad about it. Everything was positive. They all fed off each other, and the biggest part about it all, it was now their ideas. It wasn't my ideas anymore, it was theirs, and they could own it. And that's kind of the day that kind of changed everything.
Almost identical response to that. The event that we did, very similar to a town hall meeting, we billed it as a community pep rally, though. And it was an opportunity. We had the high school pep band there. Craig Schroeder was there with us. We even had former coach Tom Osborne in Nebraska, who is kind of a legend. It was when he was serving as U.S. representative, and so he came and spoke. And so we just had this kind of game-like atmosphere where we really wanted to, all of these ideas that some young adults in the community were thinking about and wanting to see happen, we knew that we could not, it couldn't be us just forcing these ideas. We really needed a large group support. So it was bringing in our outside resource providers, Craig helping us, other entities helping us, and kind of gathering the community there. And then from there it was, okay, you know, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about that youth engagement retention area? You know, come over here and sign up and you know, these are some ideas, but what are some ideas that you have? Or, you know, is it about kind of that leadership development and leadership engagement piece of it? You know, if that's where you're kind of passionate and where you think your strengths are at, you know, come over here and talk to us there. And so just kind of really, you know, bringing in those outside resource providers, kind of assembling your team so that you can be able to achieve some of those great things.
We have time for one more question.
This question could be for any of you that would be at a capacity to answer this. In your communities, in your leadership roles, do any of your communities, as you brought in different resources and held some of these functions, have comprehensive plans that define where your community is going? Have your communities talked about doing something like that? Do they have them and they're 20 years old and they sit in a shelf of dust? Do they know how to use them if they had them? That's my question.
I can speak on behalf of O'Neill's. O'Neill's comprehensive plan is 13 years old. It has been gathering dust. You know, the city council, we have a countywide economic development effort, and so we're very involved on the county level and also on our individual community levels too. And so we have pulled that out to kind of follow that along. We have another community. We have two communities in the process of really kind of updating that comprehensive plan to help kind of stay on track. But in our economic development role, I guess, that comprehensive plan really isn't guiding anything. It's more about kind of land use and zoning with our comprehensive plan, and our economic development efforts aren't about industry or business recruitment. It's about people recruitment, people retention, leadership engagement, and also that youth piece of it. So our ED efforts really don't align with that comprehensive plan, or the traditional comprehensive plan that a lot of communities have, I guess.
I'll just say that we didn't make a formal comprehensive plan, but we did take, like I mentioned, we had all these sheets throughout the building, and we sat down and met after that, and we kind of went through all of the ideas, narrowed down what projects we wanted to work on, and I still have it. It's so fun to look at. In fact, just last fall, I got it out for the club, because a lot of the people that are in our organization now weren't around when we first started this stuff. So it was really fun, and you don't quite realize even, you know, and remember in the beginning we made a plan to attack a few of these things, and we did them. So I think having the plan is important, but ours maybe isn't as fancy as the rest, but we've actually accomplished a huge number of the things that we threw out there that day.
Courtney, Tracy, Christina, Josue, Nicole, Sean, thank you. That was wonderful. We really appreciate it.